Hi, in this video we'll learn how to simulate a perfectly elastic collision of our ball with the ground. In order to make our ball bounce, the concepts we'll need to review include elastic collisions and if-else statements. One of the big questions we'll be answering in this lesson is, how can we simulate the ball bouncing off the ground? Let's review elastic collisions. Being derived from Newton's third law, collisions between objects in a closed system maintain a conservation of momentum, which means the net sum of the mass times the velocity of all of the objects in the system doesn't change. In a perfectly elastic collision, kinetic energy is also conserved. To illustrate this, as the ball approaches the ground, it will have an initial velocity of Vy1 and Vx1. Because the ground exerts all of its force in the vertical direction, and because it's not moving, we can expect the y velocity of the ball to change, but the x velocity to remain constant. In the previous example, we were able to detect when the ball hit the ground using an if statement, but we were only concerned with the time it took. The same principle will apply here, but now we'll need to update the ball's velocity instead of printing out the elapsed time. Since after the collision the ball will have the same x velocity, we won't need to change this, and for now it will remain 0. Since our collision is perfectly elastic, and because we're assuming the ground doesn't move, our final y velocity will have the same magnitude, but only its sign will change. The simple formula we'll use for this is Vy2 equals negative Vy1. Let's review the if-else statement. Now to code this, we'll need to use an if-else statement. If-else works just like if, except it has an else section. The else section contains the code that will run only if the test or condition is false. You code the if-else statement the same way you would an if statement, including the condition just as before. But this time you include the else keyword. The code in the brackets corresponding to the else section is only executed if the condition is false. Let's see how the if-else statement applies to our simulation by coding it. So let's get coding. Starting with our last exercise, we left off by outputting the time to impact to the console. We're going to modify this existing code in order to make the ball bounce. First, we should delete the call to stop timer and print line, since we won't be needing those. We can also delete the elapsed time variable at the top as well as the elapsed time calculation. Next, we'll convert our original if statement into an if-else by adding the else section. Then we'll move the calculation that updates our velocity to the else section. The reason for this is that we want to avoid updating the velocity at the moment the ball hits the ground. Otherwise, our ball will actually be gaining energy with each bounce. Finally, we'll include the code to negate the velocity when the ball hits the ground. That should go in the if section of our if-else statement. When we run the code, we should see a fairly realistic bouncing ball simulation. You can almost hear the ball bouncing. Now it's your turn.